Hi, this is Nancy Buswell, and welcome to the first video on my channel, Mock Exams with Miss Buswell. In my videos, I will give you information about the IELTS speaking exam from the point of view of a former examiner. Now, don't expect long videos. These are going to be short and sweet. So today's video is about the IELTS exam, a short introduction to the exam, and then I'll talk about part one of the speaking exam. Now, the IELTS exam is a proficiency exam. That is, it judges how proficient you are, that is, how good you are. It judges your level. Sometimes people say, I need to pass my IELTS exam. Well, we know what you mean, but there's no such thing as passing the exam. I need to make a 7 so I can immigrate to Canada. Maybe that means I need to pass it, but that just means you made what you need to make, right? So proficiency, it's a proficiency exam. It tells you what your level is. And I've already mentioned band 7, or I need to make a level 7. For some reason they use the word band 7. There's 9 bands, from 1 to 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 you probably are not interested in. Some of you need to make a 6, many of you need to make a 7, a few of you need to make an 8, and there's 2 or 3 of you who have your goal is to make a 9. So a 9 would be basically an educated native speaker, not any native speaker, but an educated native speaker. By the way, a 1 would be someone who can't even say, hi, my name is Nancy. I was an examiner for only 1 year, about 8 years ago in China, southern China. I never heard a 1. I mean, why? Why would they take a test? I did hear a 2 once. It was quite a surprise. She needed to join her husband, I think, in the US or UK. Who knows? She could only say, my name is so-and-so, I have a baby. Those were the only things she could say, so I believe that qualified her as a 2, if I recall correctly. However, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s are most likely what you need, 6s and 7s especially. The test is worldwide, and it's the same all over the world. If someone says to you, the scores in New York City are lower than somewhere else, I don't think that's true. I lived in China, and people in China said, oh, we need to go to Korea or Vietnam or Malaysia to make a higher score. Yeah, I don't think that's true. If it's true, it shouldn't be true. The scores should be the same all over the world. By the way, I mentioned, I talked about bands 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to have some videos coming up in a couple of weeks that give a lot more information about what a band, for example, band 5, 6, and 7, and 8. Yeah, what bands 5, 6, 7, and 8 sound like for vocabulary and for pronunciation and things like that. So you'll have more details in about 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Or if you're listening to this after I made this, I'm making this at the end of February, then you can hear everything at the same time. So the IELTS exam has 4 sections: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Now, most students prepare the reading and the listening parts at home because there's good material. There's good material you can find online and you can buy so that you can prepare at home. Students, if they can, will have lessons for for writing and speaking because it's a little difficult to improve. Well, I wouldn't say it's difficult to improve without lessons, but it helps. It helps a lot. Of course, I teach English, so I think lessons are useful, but I understand not everyone can afford lessons. That's why you're here on YouTube. There's lots of information. Lessons are good if you can afford them. But most likely, if people have lessons, they're for speaking and or writing. Let's go on and talk about the speaking exam. I'm a specialist in the speaking exam. I will not be talking about the reading, writing, or listening exams. There's other people who know much, much more than I do. So the speaking exam has 3 parts, simply called Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. I'll talk about Part 1 right now. So when I explain what the sections are like, I like to say, well, Part 1 is like you're talking to someone you don't know, and you're just getting to know them. You could also say some of the questions are like icebreaker questions. Icebreaker questions are like getting to know you questions. Maybe you've used them in your English classes before. Part 2 is telling a story. Part 3 I call an intelligent discussion on a certain topic. So Part 1, yeah, is getting to know you type questions or icebreaker type questions. The examiner starts out with the basics. Of course, what is your name? Where are you from? Are you a student or are you working? Then there's 3 possible next topics, either about your school or your work, or about your home, or about your hometown. And then, and there's usually 4 questions in each, in those. So it's either talk about school/work, or talk about your home or your hometown, and the examiner asks 4 questions. By the way, the examiner can only read what's on the paper, what's in the examination booklet. The examiner can't add extra things in Part 1. She can in Part 3, but not in Part 1. Let's see, so after the introductory questions, there's topics. And each topic has 4 questions, and how many topics you get or how many questions you get depends on how long your answers are. When I was an examiner, I remembered phone. When I was an examiner, I remembered we had to write down 3 before work started. Before we met anybody, we wrote down the numbers of 3 topics we would use, and we almost never got to the third one, and we often didn't get to the second one. When I say we, I mean I don't know what the other examiners did. We didn't, we weren't supposed to communicate that much with each other about the test. So I almost never got to the third topic, because that would mean the person had given really short answers. I often got to the second topic, and occasionally I didn't if people were giving really long answers, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So there's topics. The topic that I'm using when I give mock exams now is about shoes, and there's 4 questions about shoes. Let's see, I have it memorized because I use this almost every day when I give mock exams. Let's see, do you prefer comfortable shoes or fashionable shoes? Do you have a favorite kind of shoes? Have you ever bought shoes on the internet? How often do you buy new shoes? And to tell the truth, I use this question, first of all, I think it's silly, but second of all, I use it because I would say 1/2 to 2/3 of the people I listen to make a mistake with shoes. It's very common to get a little confused. Yeah, I like my shoes, they is good. No, or I buy it. They have trouble with, is it or them? Like that. That's why I use the shoes topic. So, different topics, 4 questions. Now, altogether, there's 26 possible topics. There's an old examination booklet and a new one. So there's 2 examination booklets that are being used at all times. And the examination booklets are good for 8 months. And every 4 months, the old one stops being used, and then a new examination booklet is used with new questions. And when I say new questions, they're not always new questions. It's natural. There's only so many questions in this world. Questions are used again, or similar ones are used. So there's 26 possible topics, 4 questions each. I didn't do the math. Actually, it's real close. There's a little more than 100 possible questions. Now, in part 1, this is what I say to almost every student I give a mock exam to. In part 1, I don't want to hear long answers. Long answers are for part 3. If you have a mock exam with me, you'll almost certainly hear me say that. Unless you tell me, oh, I've listened to your videos, you don't have to tell me the introductory stuff. Yeah, I don't want to hear long answers because long answers are not necessary in part 1. The questions are pretty easy and the answers should be natural. If they're really long, you know, if you're trying to extend it as long as you can or to a certain amount of time, that doesn't necessarily sound natural. So just give a natural answer, which usually would just be 2 or 3 sentences. And yeah, don't memorize your answers. Try to speak naturally. There's that word again. We like natural speaking. Okay? I recommend that you answer the question and then you tell me why. Yes, I do, because da-da-da-da-da. Okay? Now, what happens if you give a long answer? Well, there's a chance the examiner will interrupt you. There's a chance the examiner will stop you and ask another question. Now, I never did that when I was an examiner, even with people who gave long answers and it was boring and they were starting to go off topic. I never stopped them because I didn't know we could. But obviously examiners can, because I've had many students tell me, oh yeah, he interrupted me. Sorry to hear that. But clearly they're allowed to do that. I guess you know, my trainer just didn't talk about that, or I never asked that question. So you're not going to get a lower score if you're interrupted. If you have a long answer and you're interrupted, that's not going to affect your score at all, but it could make you nervous. And being nervous can affect your score. So that's why I recommend don't give long answers. Give natural answers and answer the questions. And explain your answers. So that's, I believe, all I want to say about part 1 for today. Guess what the next lesson is on? Yep, we'll talk about part 2. Now, I talked a little longer than usual because this is the first video and I was talking about the exam and then part 1. I actually want these to be fairly short videos. I know there's a lot of really long things you can watch on YouTube, and I know there's a lot of YouTube channels you can watch. That's a clock in the background. I know there's a lot of YouTube channels you can watch, and I thank you very much for watching mine. If you can click on subscribe, that would be helpful to me, and I hope to see you again very soon.